The Hulk from day one, front cover, was a monster. Perhaps this is why people are more accepting that Ben Grimm is usually presented as less powerful. There's something about being and embracing oneself as a monster that allows for cutting loose than being a man in a monstrous form does. The point we see over and over is that even when you try to put a civilized, educated man into the Hulk's body, inevitably the slide is towards monster. Steve Englehart recognized the Hulk as a monster, but his approach wasn't to explore the aspects of being a monster, but rather to go the Godzilla route and pitch the monster against other monsters. Case in point, picking up where we left off in The Incredible Hulk with issue 159 and his own monstrous counterpart. Picking up after the trip to Counter-Earth, Banner is trying to bring the rocket in without waking the Rhino from his low oxygen-induced unconsciousness. And while the leader is messing with his head, Banner keeps control, though, both of the craft and of himself, only for Ross to fire missiles at it. One is deflected off the craft, hits the ground, and frees the previously buried Abomination. The spacecraft is soon destroyed, and Banner becomes the Hulk in midair. The Abomination, unaware that he's been in a coma underground for 2 years, is ready to hop back into the fray that he thinks he was just momentarily knocked out in. Except the Hulkbusters nab the Abomination, thinking they're grabbing the Hulk and bring him back to base. Ross has no love for the Abomination after the last time they crossed paths, but what he cares about more is making sure Betty never hears the Hulk, and by extension Bruce Banner, is still alive. So he says if the Abomination will take care of the Hulk, they'll cure him and let him go. Well, they do tussle, but from the Hulk's words, the Abomination realizes that Ross was humoring him when he said that it was 1970 and not 1972 like the calendars said. It's a distraction that lets the Hulk put him down, but before that, Abomination lets slip that Betty is at Niagara Falls, leading us to 160. The Hulk goes bounding across the countryside trying to get to Niagara Falls, but doesn't know where it is, so finally changes back to Banner. Fortunately, Banner had planned ahead this time and kept some traveler's checks in his pockets in the hopes that they might survive the transformation. And a couple of them do, enough for a change of clothes and a private flight to New York. Back in the desert, Ross and his forces head after him, leaving the Abomination behind, and near where the Rhino landed after the spacecraft blew up. Their proximity to each other will eventually come in down the line. You might not know, but despite a 3-issue start in Amazing Spider-Man, the Rhino spent a long time as a Hulk adversary before being part of Spidey's rogue gallery. And when he returned, he was really more part of the Sinister Six that just happened to be going up against Spider-Man. I'd argue it was other writers throwing him against the Hulk for so long that gave him the staying power to be worth throwing into the group. As they near the falls, Banner realizes why the Hulk was so fixated on this place, and the strain of knowing he's lost Betty causes him to change right in the plane. Talbot sees the plane crash land and learns the Hulk was on board, but right now the Hulk is being attacked by the villain Tiger Shark, enemy of Namor, who's actually hiding here because he killed Namor's father, and the Submariner does not suffer such things gladly. So he presumes that the Hulk is here on behalf of his fellow Defender. While they fight, Talbot convinces Betty that they should leave and take a vacation in Canada, which after beating up Tiger Shark is where Hulk goes to flee Ross. Before we get to what happens next, though, we should back up. Steve Englehart, whom we mentioned over in From Here to Infinity for his role in the Silver Surfer series, was at the start of his career at this point. The X-Men had been canceled, but Roy Thomas thought they should give Beast a chance to try to carry a solo book. Jerry Conway kicked this off with issue 11 of Amazing Adventures, and did something radical. He made Beast into a literal beast, as opposed to a guy with huge hands and feet. Issue 12 was then handed over to Steve Englehart for his very first superhero run. Alas, the bi-monthly book just wasn't being carried by Beast, even after Marvel changed him from gray to blue, and the story ended prematurely in issue 16. The plan was that they were going to work on a War of the Worlds inspired story around a new character named Killraven, and Englehart wasn't given an issue to wrap up Beast's story. To add insult to injury, Killraven wasn't ready. So issue 17 was indeed a Beast story, a reprinting of his origin story from X-Men 49 to 53, with Englehart penning a brief bit of framing for that. Thus, once again, an aborted story winds up getting wrapped up in the pages of The Incredible Hulk, bringing us to 161. The Hulk arrives in Canada, and the Mounties try to arrest him. As I've said before, I'm trying to keep this series serious, but I have to confess, Englehart's run makes this incredibly difficult, not the least of which being helped by a Mountie shouting, "Fire! Fire, you slackers!" The presence of the Hulk closes the border, which is a problem for Hank McCoy and Vera needing to find someone in order to save the world. He has to knock her out and remove his human disguise to leap past the checkpoint to enter Canada, but they'll need to hurry. The person they're after is currently sapping the Hulk's strength, and the Hulk hates being weakened, so heads that way to put a stop to it. The source is Mimic, and Vera brings Beast here to try to stop his power from killing everyone on Earth. Hulk arrives intent on finishing off Mimic to stop the drain that's hurting him, but Beast tries to stop him. As the Hulk is weakened, it does make it more of a fair fight, but in the end, the madder Hulk gets, the stronger Hulk gets, and Beast's mockery and acrobatics get him very mad indeed. So Mimic decides if he's so dangerous he might possibly kill the Hulk, he's going to need to sacrifice himself, and absorbs gamma radiation so that it will kill him. And with the threat ended, the Hulk leaves Beast behind. When Englehart finished his Beast stories, he didn't leap straight to the Hulk, but he was also taking over Captain America, where he conceived of Steve Rogers' transformation into Nomad, and also Avengers, where he admits he was aping Roy Thomas until he found his own voice with the creation of Mantis, and he also decided to add Beast to that team, if you're wondering. But before even those, Thomas handed off another project to Englehart, Marvel Feature, which kicked off with the Defenders for 3 issues and was passed off to Ant-Man for issues 4 to 10. And as I also mentioned over on From Here to Infinity, issue 11 and 12 were with The Thing and would lead to the series relaunching as Marvel 2-in-1. But the passing of Marvel Feature to Ant-Man happened so that the Defenders could launch their own bi-monthly book. It wouldn't be until after issue 3 that Englehart took over the Hulk, but the Defenders gives us a look at his original approach to the character. Continuity-wise, these 5 issues likely took place after the Hulk's return from Jarella's world and before he mixed it up with the Rhino. Defenders number 1 opens, appropriately for our purposes, with the Hulk seeing Namor fall from the sky unconscious and having to puzzle out what to do. He can't wake him up, can't touch him, but remembers Doctor Strange is a doctor, and a doctor might help. He's still mad at Strange, but thinks that since he has more enemies than friends, saving a friend is too important. Fortunately, he stops himself from smashing Strange when he remembers that he came here to ask for help, and sure enough, this is sorcery at work. Someone named Necrodamus, who works with the Undying ones. Those were the guys that both Namor and Strange dealt with, and then Hulk and Strange, when that girl was left in Strange's place so that he could return to our reality. Well, this is about revenge on the 3 that thwarted them, so Namor is to be sacrificed. Out of options, Strange uses a time spell to try to slow things down so they can come up with a plan. The problem is that doing so takes such power that the previous time spell, the one cast on the Omegatron in Marvel Feature number 1, the first Defenders team-up, starts to very, very slowly move forward towards the apocalypse that Doctor Strange was trying to stop. As for this problem, Namor is drawn through the ground into the caverns, so the Hulk and Doctor Strange head inside, and where the Hulk gets another monster to fight. It doesn't take long, and soon they see the form of the Nameless One over the altar as the moment of sacrifice approaches. At the sight of them, Necrodamus grows large and powerful and fights the Hulk. Strange uses this to cause water vapor to collect inside of the barrier surrounding Namor so that he gets enough strength to awaken and free himself. But while he saves the Hulk, he is in a position to be sacrificed anyway, and it takes Strange and Bruce Banner holding Necrodamus back long enough for the alignment of the stars to pass, and thus the ritual to fail. But that's when Namor reveals that it wasn't Necrodamus who threw him from the heavens, it was the Silver Surfer, leading us to issue 2. 2 months have passed, and they haven't found the Surfer until he swoops down and plucks Namor from the icy sea. He wants to talk to Namor about how he can help this planet, and is rather surprised that the Submariner would interrupt by attacking him. The Surfer finally leaves, saying he's heading to his valley, where the violence of all the beings of the earth won't bother him anymore. Strange checks the diary of his friend, the one that was killed during that business with the Undying ones, and sees mention of a Himalayan valley. They collect the Hulk, who is eager to pay back whoever sent Necrodamus, and arrive in the Himalayas, and after scaring the locals to death, Dr. Strange disguises them as explorers so that they can be guided to the valley, only for the guides to be murdered in the night. They find ape men of some kind, but the Hulk starts beating them up, causing the Surfer to arrive and intervene. Namor then attacks him, but the Surfer insists he hasn't left the valley in months. He's stayed to care for these peaceful creatures. But they are not what they seem. They have spent this time gaining control of his mind to make him do their bidding. Kalazuma, their leader, is a tough one, but together the 4 of them are able to take him down, and Dr. Strange puts a spell on the rest. But the Surfer is upset at this latest development and wishes he could just return home to Zen-La. The issue ends with Dr. Strange suggesting there might indeed be a way. As I mentioned elsewhere, Stan Lee was very protective of the character, but was willing to let the Silver Surfer guest star in the Defenders for a time. The team's non-team status is why the Surfer is treated as the 4th of the original Defenders. When it comes down to it, that was just the term for some people who sometimes work together, and Surfer was there before Doctor Strange worked with him, so it makes sense to consider him one of the originals, even if his face isn't in the corner cover box. Issue 3 picks up immediately where we left off, with Strange saying that the barrier Galactus placed around the Earth exists in this dimension, but not in other dimensions. If they exited reality here and re-entered beyond the boundary, the Surfer would be free. Namor finds the idea interesting, but the Hulk is angry that Strange is always bossing him around and plans to leave. But when the Surfer asks him to come along as a friend, the Hulk changes his mind. Friendship, as established, is rare for the Hulk, and he values it. So Strange pulls them into another dimension, only it's not his intended destination. It's the one where Barbara is still imprisoned. With the Surfer to augment Strange's magic, they're able to free her, but are soon sucked towards some vortex. The Hulk is able to hold himself against the pull, while the others cling to him, and Namor goes to retrieve the Surfer's board. Together they're able to escape the pull, only to be shocked as each of their loves appears: Clea, Jarella, Shalabal, and Namor's bride Dorma. Except Namor knows that she died. This is a deception. Sure enough, Barbara went mad in isolation and finally accepted the offer to join with the Nameless One. But the plan had been that they would have had their power drained by all those tricks they had to deal with. But the plan didn't account for the fact that these are 4 extremely powerful dudes. They defeat the Nameless One, but Doctor Strange will not abandon Barbara again, even if she has fully embraced the villain. But pulling her away drives her to madness, and what's worse, the plan to free the Surfer fails, and he flies off in despair, leading us to issue 4. We pick up with the Hulk holding Barbara, mad at Doctor Strange for seemingly hurting her, mad that he bosses the Hulk around, mad that when the Hulk does good he doesn't get thanked, so he leaps away with the madwoman. Namor and Doctor Strange follow into the nearby castle, only to be transported to a place of knights and a conjurer that robs Strange of his magics. Turns out that the executioner is behind this, who pitches them in a cell with Bruce Banner and Barbara, across from the Black Knight and the Enchantress. The Enchantress is delighted because she can use her power to turn Barbara into the Valkyrie, just like she did against the Hulk. Except with Barbara's mind broken, the Valkyrie won't just be grafted on, but will effectively just take over. The Valkyrie breaks them all out, and together they take down all the various baddies, including the Queen that was working with the Executioner. But now there's the problem of Enchantress having made Black Knight love her while she wants to go with the Executioner. Well, she does what naturally would occur to anyone. She turns him into stone so she doesn't have to deal with it. Strange brings them all back to their time, while Valkyrie takes up the Black Knight's ebony blade and his flying horse Aragorn. She'll have them while Strange works to unravel this petrification spell. Namor, though, is resistant to her becoming a member of the Defenders, specifically because he doesn't want anyone getting any ideas that Defenders are any kind of a team. But the running down clock reminds that, team or no, the Defenders have old business that needs to be revisited, taking us to issue 5. Valkyrie is allowed to stay with Doctor Strange for the moment while she decides what to do with herself, seeing how she has no memory of any time before being brought into existence, except for the fight with the Hulk that we already discussed. Further complicated by the fact that her nature makes her distrustful of men, but also makes women distrust her. Clea wants her to get lost. Strange thinks that she needs the companionship of friends and that the Defenders would indeed be a good choice for that, so he gives her a means to track them down. But Namor makes clear he's not happy with humanity right now, and that includes her, but then vanishes. She goes to the Hulk, who is conflicted because he likes Valkyrie, but he doesn't like being a Defender, which is what she wants him to be. During their tussle, he too vanishes. With Namorita, she uses the crystals to reach the building where the Omegatron has taken them in anticipation of its triumphant moment. By forcing Valkyrie to fight the controlled Namor and Hulk, the combat completes the power-up and the Omegatron can now complete its purpose and say its creator's name to usher in the end of the world. But between Namor, the Hulk, and Valkyrie, the Omegatron fails to complete the name. But while the Hulk doesn't want to hear anything about the Defenders and leaves, Namor is impressed by her capabilities and wits. Now, of course, this series is about the Hulk and not about the Defenders, but what comes from this are two consistencies in how Englehart is handling the Hulk. One is that he is unstable, that he wants to be with others but doesn't, won't fight those who are weaker unless he does. He's a complication, especially with a sense that he's not being treated like he deserves. The other is sending the Hulk against monsters. In almost all cases, there's something nasty and inhuman the Hulk gets to beat up. This is consistent with what we've been seeing in the Hulk's own book, and it doesn't end with the Beast either. But we should pick back up with the Hulk where we left him in Canada in issue 162. General Ross shows footage of the Hulk to the Canadian authorities so they can comprehend what they're dealing with here, and why it should be left to the Hulkbusters. The official representing Prime Minister Trudeau, the father of the guy that you might be familiar with, sees the point, though he adds there is pressure from the Canadian Air Force to handle this.
Contact the Canadian Air Force. Harold, it's after 6. He's gone home.
The Hulk is frustrated because he's trying to find Betty, only to have gotten himself lost. He hears someone calling out for help, though, and decides to help, but in keeping with his luck, he winds up getting targeted by a Canadian posse. But it's a case of mistaken identity, and the upset young woman going on about her brother Paul causes the Hulk to get past his normal rage to make clear he isn't the Wendigo that they think he is, but that he did hear someone named Paul calling for help. The Hulk goes to find Paul so that, as he makes clear, at least people will stop hating him for something he didn't even do. He stumbles across the actual Wendigo and its latest victim, some poor schmuck that had trapped beneath its body while it slept so it could eat him when it wakes up. The Wendigo attacks, and in the end, the Hulk is left with the badly injured human, who he assumes is Paul, so takes back to the town rather than finishing the Wendigo off. But it's Paul's friend who explains what happened. The two of them, plus another, were out there. They were trapped in a cave by wolves. The third one died of his injuries. Well, they were starving, so Paul finally ate some of the dead guy, and that turned him into a Wendigo. Paul has been psychically calling out to the Hulk for help, so the Hulk returns in the hopes of bringing the Wendigo back so that someone can cure Paul. But even though he can overcome the Wendigo, it's too late. Paul vanishes into the bestial mind, and when it slips his grip, the Hulk doesn't pursue since it's too late now. What you might have noticed throughout all of these issues is that Englehart at this time was building upon what others had made. This is, of course, not a criticism. Picking up the strands of Barbara in one storyline and the Valkyrie in the other and adding a new superhero to the Defenders, that's a great move. We can see with retrospect how Englehart worked backwards to lead to that eventuality. With the Hulk, however, we're seeing an unfortunate trend that Englehart doesn't really have a plan for him. He's making use of Betty's marriage to Talbot to drive events, certainly, but the sense that is emerging is that he's better at using the Hulk in an ensemble rather than alone. The Wendigo is the first original creation we've seen, obviously drawn from indigenous culture, though realized as a sort of albino Sasquatch in a likely attempt to, once again, give the Hulk a strong monster to fight, rather than the way the Wendigo was traditionally presented. Issue 163 is the one to really break from the streak, and this is likely down to artist Herb Trimpe. He was a contributor to the storylines, especially around the Hulkbusters. With permission to operate in Canadian airspace, Ross Hulkbusters have chased the Hulk into the Arctic, where he eventually falls through the ice into a cavern. Inside is a city created by the Soviets and led by the son of the Hulk's oldest enemy, the one who captured him way back in Incredible Hulk #1, the Gargoyle. Well, this is his son, the Gremlin, who has created the Super Trooper, and they're here to capture the Hulk. So falling down here has made that job easier. But the Super Troopers are no match for the Hulk, so they have to resort to knockout gas. But they are more than a match for the Hulkbusters and take General Ross prisoner too. The Gremlin gloats over the Hulk, believing he had murdered his father, not that the Gargoyle sacrificed himself in an act of spite against Khrushchev. Using the gas to keep Hulk weakened, the Gremlin tests his abilities to learn ways of applying the Hulk's endurance to his Super Troopers. The Hulk's insolence gets him a double dose of the gas, which is enough to turn him back into Banner. Ross sends him a note saying their only hope is for him to become the Hulk, so before the Gremlin can strap him down to study his gamma-enhanced anatomy, Banner gets worked up enough to change. But facing more gas, the Hulk bolts and has no problem leaving Ross behind. Back in America, Betty and Talbot return from their honeymoon only for the paper to give away that the Hulk is indeed alive, which she's overjoyed at, but also that her father has been captured by the Russians, which is heartbreaking, leading us to issue 164. In his effort to find Betty, all the Hulk has done is gotten himself lost in the Arctic. He comes across a submarine, assumes it's hostile, and punches it. The sound of that draws the attention of Captain Omen. If you didn't catch it, Omen is Nemo spelled backwards. Omen has his huge undersea ship bring the sub aboard, and after some trouble, the Hulk as well. The Hulk wakes up, confused, and Omen explains that the reason his people look funny is that they live 6 miles underwater. His plan is to mark and survey the ocean floor so that he can legally be recognized as its rightful owner. Won't he be surprised when Namor shows up? He naturally wants to enslave the Hulk to help carry this out, and the Hulk naturally rips his way through the walls and makes toward the surface. Except he can't. They're so deep he gets the bends. After Unhumans, the name for Omen's followers since obviously Inhumans is already taken, after Unhumans ride out on toad whales, the Hulk is dragged back and put in a decompression chamber where he turns back into Banner. Meanwhile, the fact that Lieutenant General is in Soviet hands has not gone unnoticed, but the president does not want to start World War III over just one man. So Nick Fury is called in, but only to devise the plan, he finds out. As with Vietnam over, the Air Force has all these trained commandos and no idea what to do with them all. Yes, that is their actual reasoning. Colonel Armbruster will be handling things, and Talbot insists on going along to help rescue Ross. Back on the ship, Omen shows Banner how he has recreated the surface for the second-generation crew that operates his ship. But the crew's curiosity about the surface, well, one thing leads to another, and the Hulk is back. Omen has him knocked into a dome by his forces that is then dropped into the sea, where the Hulk breaks out, only with no place to go. Omen gives him a helmet to be able to breathe, but now he is a slave, which takes us to issue 165. The Hulk is fuming that he is trapped and enslaved, forced to follow the infraworld, as Omen calls his submarine, unaware that the Unhumans have been plotting. They disrupt the rear camera long enough so one of them can go out in a green shirt to replace the Hulk so that they can talk with him. Phileas, who, as anyone with passing familiarity with Latin knows, is Omen's son, but he is the leader of a revolutionary force that wants to escape their own enslavement and return to the surface, even leading them in worshipping the confused Hulk as a god. On the surface, we learn that the premier, presumably Alexei Kosygin, is outraged. Brezhnev was in the midst of several efforts to thaw relations with the West at this time, and was in fact soon going to visit Washington to discuss many important bilateral agreements. Suffice to say, my mutant living under the ice captured your 3-star general will not contribute towards successful talks. Ross admits, as he's facing down death at the hands of America's enemies, that his pursuit of the Hulk was often as not for personal reasons rather than for duty. He's unaware of Armbruster's plan or Talbot joining in. In an important character moment, Betty tells Talbot 2 things: that Bruce is the past and he's her present and future. And perhaps more importantly, she didn't settle for him. Back on the infraworld, one of the revolutionaries gets cold feet and narks to Omen, who, in keeping with the Englehart run, sends a monster against the Hulk. Aquan. Half man, half fish, all hate. In the fight, the hull is ruptured, but the Hulk nevertheless triumphs. Omen gives in to the revolutionaries' demands and surfaces, only for them all to begin bursting open because their hearts are too powerful without the pressure of the sea to hold them back. That gruesomeness finished, we go on to issue 166. The Hulk returns to New York, drawn because of his connection to Doctor Strange's magic, but soon turns back into Banner. Elsewhere, anti-establishment revolutionaries are sabotaging a power plant, a nuclear power plant. The result is an energy monster, again, monsters, called Zazac, who hungers for the energy of human brains because with that energy, Zazac can think. The attention drawn is not the Hulk's right now, but Hawkeye. He got upset about Scarlet Witch's growing romance with Vision, and finally, in a fit of pique, quit the Avengers to prove he could cut it as a superhero on his own. So far, he hasn't. So he's delighted that Zazac presents a menace that he can thwart. He should hurry because it's stumbled across Banner and knocks him cold, and while on the other side of the world, Armbruster, Talbot, and the rest have landed in Russia to rescue Ross. Hawkeye tries to disrupt Zazac but fails. What's worse is Banner changes, and Hawkeye insists on getting the glory here, so he starts firing at the Hulk so he can have the monster all to himself. That does nothing except annoy the Hulk, who is far more concerned about smashing Zazac. Hawkeye gets the odd attack in, but is still deluded into thinking him beating the monster is more important than the monster simply being beaten. Eventually he deduces that if he grounds it to the water, he can short it out. It works in stopping the monster, but all anyone saw was the Hulk fighting Zazac, and then it was defeated, so he gets all the glory. As for Russia, the team frees Ross without a problem, but during the escape, as Talbot is fighting to protect their retreat, he's shot and seemingly falls to his death. But in fact, the Russian doctors say he is still alive. From this, the Hulk's story continues over in the Defenders. He sat out issue number 6 when the Silver Surfer returned, but issue 7 actually picks up with the aftermath of the fight with Zazac. Hawkeye is following the Hulk around to his annoyance, wanting to know about his connection to Doctor Strange. The Hulk ignores his badgering until he becomes annoyed enough to attack, and Hawkeye realizes a trick arrow is not solving this. To make it worse, the Hulk is soon laughing at him, because Valkyrie, seeing her fellow Defender attacked, leaps in and begins kicking the stuffing out of Hawkeye. He thinks she's the Enchantress in disguise, like the first time they met, so he cuts loose, only for Namor to finally put him down and admit to what's happening. Seems besides storming off from the Avengers, Hawkeye teamed up with someone who turned out to be a villain, so then he tried to hook back up again with Black Widow, only at this time Black Widow was an item with Daredevil, who, as you can see from this picture, joins the list of people beating up Hawkeye this issue. To add insult to literal injury, while he's recovering from his beating, the Avengers arrive to recruit Daredevil to take Hawkeye's place on the team. Well, Valkyrie explains the connection is that the Hulk is a member of the Defenders with Doctor Strange, and Namor has to once again insist there are no members here. There's no leader. It's 3 to 5 people who sometimes protect the world because it serves their own interests. Hawkeye joins them in walking to the Sanctum Sanctorum, only to learn Strange isn't there. The success of the Defenders was such that not only did it become a monthly instead of a bi-monthly, but they decided to test the waters with Strange in a solo book in Marvel Premiere, and Englehart was soon writing that as well. But when an Atlantean arrives at the door saying that Atuma is attacking Atlantic City, Hawkeye will take his place in the Defenders. They fight many giant crabs, but when Namor is defeated and held hostage, the others surrender as demanded, except the Hulk recalls what happened with Captain Omen and thus refuses to get on another ship. Instead, he leaps away. We pick up with him in issue number 8 when Doctor Strange has returned. Doctor Strange was off gaining the wisdom needed to turn Black Knight back to normal, and so summons the Defenders so they can see all their hard work is paid off. The lack of any sign of Namor or Valkyrie is worrying, and it gets the Hulk's mind going. But he gets annoyed when their anxiousness about it seems like bossing him around again. Since this is possibly life or death, Silver Surfer restrains the Hulk long enough for Strange to cast a spell to learn what happened from the Hulk, and then lets him take a nap. After the rescue, everyone is brought back, and Doctor Strange invokes the "My friends in Zoidberg for real" with "I have brought the Defenders" and Hawkeye, here to witness the restoration of the Black Knight. The Hulk is unhappy with them, but will stay for Black Knight because of the past behavior that showed he was a friend. This now kicks off the Avengers vs. Defenders storyline. This we'll spend a bit of time on because this is undoubtedly where Englehart was making the best use of him as a part of this ensemble. Things begin in the final pages of Avengers number 115, when we see a tumbling Loki, blinded after a battle with Thor. Dormammu has rescued him because Doctor Strange has forced him to stay out of our realm, and he's looking for a loophole. He's going to use something the Fantastic Four once dealt with, the Evil Eye, to allow his dimension to swallow our world. With Earth inside of his domain, then, Dormammu can conquer it at will. The Evil Eye is in 6 pieces scattered around the world, and with Loki's help, Dormammu can manipulate the Defenders into collecting them and bring about this terrible end. Loki agrees, provided Dormammu will restore his sight. This is why Doctor Strange's effort to contact the Black Knight go awry. Dormammu arranges this so that he could intercept and alter the message to say the Evil Eye will save him. Avengers 116 begins with the Avengers trying to get into the Sanctum Sanctorum to see if Black Knight's in there, only to be repeatedly thwarted. Doctor Strange isn't even directly acting. He's far too busy giving the backstory on the Evil Eye so that they can make their plans. The pieces scattered to Bolivia, French Polynesia, Japan, Mexico, Los Angeles, and Fort Wayne, Indiana. They all need to pitch in, and letting Hulk know how important it is that he help out, the Hulk agrees to as well. But Loki realizes that if Dormammu can take Earth like this, he could take Asgard as well, and he will not allow that. So he slips off to warn the Avengers, but being the god of lies, he has to spin it, as if they're hoping to do great evil to mankind. That's why they must be stopped. Convinced, the Avengers decide to split up and head to the locations to thwart the Defenders, and the contest is on. We kick off in French Polynesia, where, being the 70s, the locals begin to worship the Silver Surfer when he shows up, and they want to make sacrifices to him. He realizes the one place he didn't look around here was inside of the volcano. But while he's looking, Vision is ahead of the Scarlet Witch, which means that they're separated, and when the Surfer accidentally sets off the volcano, it badly injures her. Now, you'll recall that Hawkeye's snit began when Scarlet Witch chose Vision over him. Well, the sight of her like this compels the Vision in his rage to attack the Surfer. While they tussle, the locals see the volcano and figure to appease it, they need a sacrifice. So they choose the Scarlet Witch. And in what is lame for this scenario, they settle for just placing her unconscious body in the path of the lava and calling it a sacrifice. So when both Vision and the Surfer have a chance to get the fragment of the eye, Vision calls it off to go rescue Wanda. Both sides are now convinced that the other is out for blood and must be thwarted, leading us to Defenders number 9. The Surfer returns and tells Doctor Strange what happened, and using the orb of Agamotto, Strange sees not only the taint of Loki's evil on them, but also that the Swordsman, a known criminal, is a member now. This explains to him why the Avengers would seek to thwart their efforts to save the Black Knight. He sends a mental message to Hawkeye and Valkyrie. She's dropping him off in Mexico, see. In keeping with the judgment that has gotten him beaten up so very much lately, Hawkeye pulls Valkyrie to himself to kiss her deeply and very nearly gets decapitated for it. She heads off to Bolivia while he soon has to throw down with Iron Man. Not because he tried to kiss him. Though Hawkeye, you will not be surprised to learn, is the one that nevertheless starts it. Iron Man has found the piece asking around at the university, and Hawkeye yoinks it and is eager to get back to the old days when he was Iron Man's enemy. His success is kind of accidental. His arrow knocks Iron Man's repulsor ray, so it threatens a building full of people, and Iron Man has to save them, even if it means letting Hawkeye escape. Doctor Strange is headed to Indiana, the closest location to New York, where he encounters Black Panther and Mantis. Since fighting them isn't the point of this exercise, he just takes the fragment and attempts to slip away, disguising himself as one of the locals with a spell. But Mantis can sense something's up and horrifies T'Challa by knocking an old woman under the bus, only for Strange to drop his disguise. T'Challa has a good idea by grabbing onto Strange's hands and kicking his jaw so he can't gesture or speak for spellcasting, but ultimately he realizes this only goes on as long as it does because Doctor Strange held back his full power. When he sees it's starting to get out of control, Doctor Strange just knocks the two down with a spell and takes off, leading us to Avengers 117. In Bolivia, the Swordsman is reflecting on his previous career as a criminal before the Avengers got him to see the light. Then Valkyrie drops her flying horse Aragorn on his Quinjet and nearly crashes it. The piece of the eye is located in a castle built by an escaped Nazi after World War II, and the new owner assures the Swordsman that no one is in there. But he insists on looking around, and sure enough, the Valkyrie is inside, and the two fight. His skill versus her raw power. In the end, though, he's shot in the back by the occupant. He didn't want him coming in here and discovering his treasure chest, which also happens to have the eye in it. With authorities arriving, the Valkyrie leaves with it and expects the Swordsman will get the medical care he needs from them. With that, we can hop over to Japan. Two World War II veterans are facing off as Captain America confronts Namor, who already has his fragment of the eye. Cap arguably sucker punches him, but in the end, the eye is taken by Sunfire, the Japanese mutant hero. Namor tries to pursue, but Captain America hangs on to drag him back with the dead weight. Namor, understandably, does not understand why Cap is so determined to stop him from helping the Black Knight. And finally, when Cap's stuck and not going anywhere, tells exactly what happened and why they're gathering the eye. Cap's not sure he buys it, but there are enough holes that once he catches the falling eye from Sunfire, he makes a deal to hand over the eye if he and Namor return together, bringing us to Defenders number 10. We finally return to the Hulk, who has arrived in Los Angeles, and thanks to the spell Doctor Strange used, he is drawn to where the eye is and digs it up in time for Thor to arrive. Thor tries reasoning with the Hulk, presuming that his offense at his mistreatment by mankind is driving him to join the Defenders' plot. But the Hulk is only concerned with helping Black Knight and belts him one. Thor, having tried diplomacy, now resorts to goading, saying that the confrontation between the two that we previously discussed proved conclusively, in Thor's own mind at least, that he was the superior. Well, the Hulk, between that and being confronted with the hammer that even his great strength can't lift, it finally pushes him over the edge into full-on berserker mode. The two lock in a grapple that lasts for an hour, neither moving, until finally the combined Avengers and Defenders show up to put a stop to all this. In a flashback, we see that when Namor returned with his piece, he brought the whole of the Avengers with him, save Thor, obviously. He explains that thing about wanting to take over the world, and Cap has to defend that there was more than just the word of Loki to go on, presumably to not make them look completely stupid for falling for the words of the villain who was such a menace the Avengers were created in the first place just to defeat him. Doctor Strange admits that while their number are not what you'd think of as team players and normally not on the best of terms with the human race as a whole, nevertheless there are times when their interests align and they work together. That seems to apply to the Avengers now as well, which brings us back to the Hulk and Thor and that last piece. But that's when an unknown servant of Dormammu swoops in, taking the pieces and leaves, and soon LA is being devastated, its people turned into monstrosities, and Dormammu gloats. The event then concludes in Avengers number 118. The dilemma the heroes face is that the monstrosities are hostile, but once Dormammu is defeated, being optimistic anyway, it would mean that they'd return to normal, which would mean if you kill the threat, you're ultimately murdering a human being. Luckily, Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. arrive to deal with that problem so the heroes can go and deal with Dormammu. They have to walk a special pathway together, even as Dormammu cages Loki for his betrayal, and the Watcher shows up to see what's going to happen. It's already drawn in the whole of the solar system, as not only are heroes like the FF, Spider-Man and Luke Cage, and villains like Doctor Doom and Dracula, and monsters themselves like Man-Thing and Ghost Rider, are left to deal with monstrosities. Also, Adam Warlock on Counter-Earth and Thanos on Titan. The team finally reaches Dormammu, who renders all the Defenders unconscious, and Hawkeye. He then traps Cap, Mantis, Swordsman, Black Panther, and Vision in quicksand to stop them, and then turns Thor and Iron Man into Donald Blake and Tony Stark. Scarlet Witch, thus, is the only one left, but thanks to Loki's distraction is able to hit Dormammu with her power, sending the energy of his form through the evil eye and into Loki, which does restore Loki's sight, but also drives him insane. Doctor Strange is able to take up the eye and also wipes everyone's memory of Iron Man and Thor's secret identity. This brings us to Defenders 11, and the last one that we'll cover here, as it is also the last of Steve Englehart's run on the book. The team returns to reality where Nick Fury wants to ask questions of the Defenders, which prompts Doctor Strange to wipe his memory of the Defenders' existence and anyone else save for the Avengers, since they might need each other again sometime, but otherwise they don't want people to know that there are Defenders out there. But they are a non-team. As a matter of fact, this is the Silver Surfer's last appearance. He doesn't ride with the Defenders again until issue 92. Now they are staying together long enough to help the Black Knight, though in the process they get pulled away. The Hulk is pleased that there's finally someone he can punch, this Earth spirit named T-Max. As we've established in this area, the Hulk fights monsters. We've wound up in the Crusade somehow. That's where the Black Knight has been drawn to. And in the end, Namor sorts out the Earth spirits with water. But the eye plays no role in solving things because the Black Knight is actually staying in this era where he feels that he belongs. And Prester John, who previously had the evil eye, reclaims it. So everything is now settled. Hawkeye announces he's not staying, nor are the Hulk, Silver Surfer, and Namor. Just Valkyrie and Doctor Strange are left now, but he confesses to her they are the finest fighting companions one can ask for. And Hawkeye. We now return to the Hulk's core book with issue 167, with Ross an armbruster wearing civilian clothing and returning on a civilian airliner for a bit of plausible deniability after that entering the Soviet Union thing. Though Ross is still upset with himself that Talbot is apparently dead. Though not half as much as Betty when she finds out. She rails against her father, that this is all his fault, and makes a scene. A problem because that draws the attention of a minion of Modok. This crosses over once again with our look at From Here to Infinity, because Modok is upset about the beating that he got at the hands of the Submariner, and that incident was specifically over the Cosmic Cube, which would next be seen being pursued by Thanos. But right now what bothers Modok is his lack of physical power. So he's built a big robot body that his freakish one can pilot around. But he still fears the Hulk would destroy it. So he plans to create a gamma monster of his own to defeat the Hulk, so he doesn't need to worry about that. While he's musing, Jim Wilson finally is able to catch up with the Hulk, who hasn't seen him since the Hulk went into space. He calms the Hulk down so that for the first time in quite a while, we see him turn back into Banner. Jim was nice enough to bring clothes for that occasion. Jim explains about Betty's breakdown thanks to Talbot's death, but when Bruce shows up, she goes off on him too. Hulk comes out, is upset that Betty is hitting him, but when he realizes he could have hurt her, he tears away to keep her safe from himself. He returns later with flowers, hoping it'll make her happy, only to see Modok outside her window. Modok figured the best choice is someone that has been exposed to enough gamma radiation already to have a bit of tolerance for it. That way they can be mutated into a monster, and he wants someone whose mind he can easily control. Being out of her mind makes Betty a good choice. The Hulk smashes up the robot, forcing Modok to flee, leading to issue 168. The Hulk tries again to see Betty, but the cops get in the way. There's trouble. And anyway, Betty's gone, so Jim smuggles him away in a truck. Betty has been drawn naked into the night, taken away to Modok. Meanwhile, Ross gets some bad news on top of all the other bad news he's gotten. He's being relieved of command of Project Greenskin, and it's being given to Armbruster. As for the Hulk himself, Jim gets into a fight with his girlfriend when he tries to hide the Hulk at her place. Enough of a fight, in fact, that even the Hulk realizes maybe he should just quietly walk away. As for Betty, Modok puts her in a device and bombards her with gamma radiation, enough so that she emerges, again in keeping with Englehart's run, a monster. Specifically, a Harpy. She's consumed with a hatred for him. This, as the textbook reminds us, is not too surprising, as Tales to Astonish 90 established that gamma rays affect people differently. The leader got brains, the Abomination got strength, and the Harpy is, well, a Harpy. Modok points her at the Hulk and lets her hatred for him do the rest. She attacks him and has him on the ropes until he makes a comeback, so she plays dirty. She pretends like she wasn't in control to make the Hulk lower his guard, then blasts him at point-blank range, leading us to issue 169. Ross sees what's happening on TV and heads down to try to get through to her, but Betty's mind is so muddled between her grief and being turned into a bird monster, she finally just snatches up the Hulk and flies off. After a run-in with some military jets, the pair are sucked up by some tornado into a city in the clouds, where there is, you guessed it, a monster. This is the Bi-Beast, and violence soon erupts, the Harpy getting knocked out and the Hulk passing out because of the thin air and becoming Banner. Fortunately for Banner, the Bi-Beast has need of a scientist. It was created by a race of bird people to hold their knowledge of warfare and of culture, but not science. The people died out and the equipment is breaking down, so it wants Banner to sort it out. But he wants the Harpy turned over to him. He's going to use the advanced equipment to cure them both. Only Modok shows up and says Banner's the last one you want messing with your advanced technology. That leads to the Bi-Beast attacking Banner, who becomes the Hulk again, but that was a distraction so the rest of AIM can come and claim this flying city and its technology. The Bi-Beast sets it to destroy itself instead, and with the Harpy going back to being Betty Ross again and the Hulk back to Banner, they're left to fall 8 miles when the city explodes. This might seem like a strange place to stop for now, but really, what comes from here doesn't feel like any of the rest of Steve Englehart's run. Overall, I found it to be rather underwhelming as far as the title character goes. It does introduce 3 minor characters, the Wendigo, Zazac, and the Bi-Beast, and it introduced Betty Banner as the Harpy. But it's questionable, especially with what we see of the Defenders run, how the Hulk himself seemed to be the character that he had the least to actually use, save to throw monsters at. As I said earlier, Herb Trimpe contributed substantially to stories that he worked on. He was a longtime employee at Marvel, lasting until 1996, when he and Roy Thomas were doing Fantastic Four Unlimited. It was only the financial implosion at Marvel that we discussed elsewhere that led to the guy who spent nearly 30 years at the company being pushed out the door. But Herb contributed frequently, to the point that he's sometimes listed as co-creator alongside the writer in these issues, and it seems that the Project Greenskin-related material probably tied back to him. Englehart's run was unremarkable when it came to the Hulk himself, though, and that's why he seemed better suited to ensemble books like Defenders when Englehart was writing him. Not to disparage Englehart, there's one thing that clearly comes across: he was skilled in building upon what others had done without diminishing it. But this seems to be a case where he might have been spread too thin to really think about the character of the Hulk himself, so he didn't really make much use of him, or Banner for that matter, in his own book. The Savage Hulk is not easy to work with, as either a writer or an ally.